to Invest Insights. I'm Abby Maloney. I'm joined today by Matt Smith, the president of the Greater Pittsburgh Chamber of Commerce. Matt, thank you for being here today.
Great to be with you.
Joining the chamber, you served in the Pennsylvania State Senate, as well as the Pennsylvania House of Representatives. While in the House, you were the Minority Subcommittee Chair on Economic Impact and Infrastructure. In what ways does your past experience influence your goals and expectations surrounding the recent infrastructure package and its impact on the greater Pittsburgh region?
Yeah, well, it's great to be with you today, Abby, and I think it informs quite a bit how we approach our work. And so, as you mentioned, the Infrastructure and Jobs Act was a historic piece of legislation from our friends in Washington, D.C., and we worked very hard over the last year or so in the Pittsburgh region to make sure that we, as we call it, as one region with one voice. And we only makes our argument all the stronger in Washington, D.C. when we're down there fighting for the infrastructure dollars that are going to come out, both in the context of the formula fund that's being pushed out, through existing channels, but also even more importantly, I think in the discretionary grant funding space. And so we're working really hard on that. And I think my experience from being in the legislature and as you noted, serving in a leadership role as it relates specifically to infrastructure is helpful because at that time, we worked quite a bit on state level funding. Act 89 is a big piece of legislation in Pennsylvania that was passed while I was in the legislature. And the real cornerstone of Act 89 was the bipartisan support that it enjoyed. So I was on the Democratic side of the aisle. I worked a lot with my friends on the Republican side of the aisle to build support for that legislation. We also worked quite a bit of time in bridging the gap and building bridges, if you will, between the labor community and the business community. And I think that experience has really served us well as we focus on the federal investment, because that same coalition building is going to be necessary to maximize the Pittsburgh region's opportunities in this space.
Politics are very divisive nowadays, but infrastructure seems to be a bipartisan issue that we can agree on. How did that play out in the state of Pennsylvania?
Well, it translated really directly. At the time, Pennsylvania was at the top of every list for structurally deficient infrastructure. So you name the area of infrastructure, bridge infrastructure, road infrastructure, waterways infrastructure. Pennsylvania was really at the bottom of every list. And so what Act 89 did, and it sort of laid the foundation, if you will, for what we're doing now at the federal level. And what Act 89 did was allow Pennsylvania to really think over a longer term horizon at our infrastructure needs and make plans that would not only go year to year, but would be multi-year investments that would actually add capacity, fix some of the long-standing structurally deficient capital maintenance projects that existed at the time. The other thing it did that was really critical, particularly for the business community, is Act 89 and the Infrastructure Investment and Jobs Act provides significant investment for public transportation. And in our region at the time that Act 89 was passed at the state level, there was a significant need for that sort of public transit investment for the same reason. At the time, the Port Authority of Allegheny County was really on a year-to-year basis and just kind of, moving to the next year with the bare minimum investment. What Act 89 did was allow our transit agencies throughout Pennsylvania to make those longer term investments and longer term strategic plans that are so critical for not only the business community from our vantage point, but for the entire region, and to make sure that people can get to work, make sure people can take advantage of job opportunities. And so that public transit investment was really very critical in Pennsylvania at the time, and is similarly very critical in this federal investment that we've seen over the last couple of months.
Just the pandemic and the Ukrainian-Russian war have exposed vulnerabilities of the global supply chain. How is the U.S. supply chain adapting and innovating to reduce exposure risks, and how is Pittsburgh poised to benefit from those changes?
Yeah, in Pittsburgh, companies are working to future-proof what I would say is the supply chain to increase resiliency and make sure that any external disruptions have as little impact as possible on their operations. So from driverless vehicles to robotics, innovations in this region, we're really at the forefront of how we can create a very narrow, if you will, supply chain for our region to succeed. And those are the big ones that I mentioned. We've got Wabtec in this region working to transition from diesel electric locomotives to battery electric locomotives to reduce dependence on foreign energy. And we think that's one of the keys to our success, not only as a nation, but as a region. How do we use our energy reserves here, such as natural gas, in a way that maximizes job opportunities and economic growth and equity in this region? Another example, I think that's a really good one is at Pittsburgh International Airport. Neighborhood 91 is a complete manufacturing and transportation ecosystem for additive manufacturing. And it's ready to serve, I think, as a reshoring model because it's strategically located right near the airport for ease of distribution when air cargo is required for shipping. It's building out and enabling more domestic manufacturing. It's bringing products closer to U.S. businesses and customers. And we think that very unique model where the supply chain is essentially located in one space is a really good example of how the country can develop homegrown additive manufacturing, homegrown energy sources. And we think Pittsburgh and that particular project at Pittsburgh International Airport can be a real model for shortening those supply chain difficulties.
Pittsburgh region is known for exceptional public-private partnerships. In what ways do you hope to see further creativity in partnership and collaboration among the public and private sectors to better address the challenges and opportunities facing the region?
Well, I think that really goes to the heart of our organization. We always say that there are problems that are really large in the country and the region, and neither the private nor the public sector can solve them on their own. And so we view our role as an organization in being one that convenes both our private sector stakeholders, so all of the biggest employers in the Pittsburgh region, together with our public sector leaders like our county executive, Rich Fitzgerald, our mayor, Ed Gainey, the governor, U.S. senators, and on down the line. And we think that is really at the nexus of what the secret sauce is really for the Pittsburgh region, because we historically, as an organization, have brought those stakeholders together to fix the really intractable problems. Our organization, the Allegheny Conference on Community Development, was actually created more than 75 years ago by Richard King Mellon, who at the time was a businessman in the city, and Mayor David Lawrence. And the problem that they sought to solve was air and water quality in the Pittsburgh region. And so, when we're talking about how we maximize our autonomous mobile systems sector, how we make sure that we continue to grow our very vibrant robotics sector, how do we use our energy assets? Those opportunities are really going to require significant public-private collaboration, and we think we're really well positioned for that, not only as an organization but as a region, given the breadth of success that we've had in that area, working across our foundations. Philanthropic community is a great example. And so that to me really goes to the heart of the secret sauce, and it's making sure that those public and private sectors are swimming in the same direction and working together. And as I said earlier, is as frequently as possible speaking as one, with one voice for one region. And we think that's a really critical objective if we want to maximize this region's potential.
At this season is about creativity. And you just gave us some great observations on how the greater Pittsburgh region is incorporating creativity to be more competitive. However, let's look inward. What are some of the unique ways that you are fostering creative thinking across your organization moving forward?
Yeah, I think one of the big ways that we always go to is, we're creating coalitions and campaigns on the fly. And so when we look at a specific issue that we want to tackle from the public policy side, let's say, for example, reducing the state's corporate net income tax, we figure out ways on that specific to stand up a coalition, stand up a campaign, and work with those coalition stakeholders to move that issue forward. So from our perspective, creativity and innovation is sort of at the heart of what we need to do on the political side of our work, because not every issue is going to be the same. Not every coalition is going to look the same. And so we have to be very nimble and creative in creating the coalitions. Working with our marketing and communications team is absolutely critical to make sure our messaging is the most impactful as possible on various issues. And then maintaining those coalitions is something that's really vital. And so for me, that involves a lot of creativity. It involves thinking about an issue, again, going back to the corporate net income tax rate. That may be an issue that obviously is something that affects corporations, affects the business community, but we really try to look at how it affects Pennsylvania as a whole. And it's not something that just affects the business community, but it rather is something that affects our ability and negatively impacts our ability to attract and retain talent, to grow our population, to make sure that opportunities are provided across the region in a very equitable manner. And so, when we look at those issues, we look at them with an eye towards being creative in figuring out, not just the obvious impacts of those issues, but the less obvious impacts, because frequently those stakeholders can carry a very powerful message because they're not the ones that automatically pop into mind. So I think that's a really critical space for creativity.
Well, thank you again. That was Matt Smith, the president of the Greater Pittsburgh Chamber of Commerce. If you like this video, don't forget to like and subscribe to our channel to hear more CEOs and thought leaders share their opinions and advice on today's business climate. Until next time, I'm Abby Malone, and this is Invest Insights. Thanks for tuning in.